still remember the sound of my daughter's voice that night. It wasn't loud, just tight, scared, like she was holding her breath. She said, "Dad, don't come home." And the way she said it told me she'd seen something she should have never seen. You think you know the people living under your own roof until one quiet moment splits your life in two. It made me wonder, has anyone else ever felt that kind of warning in their own home? I was locking up the maintenance room behind the gym when the evening settled into that familiar quiet. Most days ended the same way for me, wiping down tools, checking a few light switches, making sure the boilers behaved. 40 years in the Marines taught me the comfort of routine, and working at South Seattle High gave me enough of it to stay steady after my wife passed. Driving out of the parking lot usually felt like slipping back into my own skin. The school faded behind me, Rainier Avenue stretched ahead, and the thought of home, well, it depended on the day. Lately, it came with a knot I'd learned to ignore. My daughter, Alana, tried her best to be civil, but she and my wife, Vanessa, never found the rhythm I'd hoped for. Two women in the same house, both trying to hold their ground in different ways. Some nights they stayed on opposite sides of the living room like it was agreed upon. Other nights, the walls carried more tension than words. Vanessa had a habit of crossing lines she claimed she never saw. My debit card disappeared from my wallet once, only to turn up in her purse with a story attached. She flipped through Alana's journal, searching for signs of rebellion. She talked like she was the expert in every room, even when no one asked her to be. And I let it slide, every time. I'd tell myself the same thing. Keep the peace. Keep the house from cracking open. Keep everyone moving forward. That was my job. Protector, mediator. The last one standing when everyone else dropped their guard. That night, the air was cool enough for my joints to complain when I walked. I reached my truck, tossed my jacket into the back seat, and was about to start the engine when my phone rang. Alana's name lit up. I figured she wanted dinner from the place on Henderson, the one she always pretended she didn't like but finished anyway. Her voice came before I could say hello. "Dad, don't come home." It wasn't loud, wasn't panicked, just tight, like she'd been whispering for too long and finally ran out of breath. "What are you talking about?" There was a pause, the kind that twists your stomach before your mind catches up. "Just, please, don't come home tonight." The lines stayed open. I could hear her breathing, thin and uneven. I asked again, "Alana, what happened?" "I can't say it on the phone. Just trust me. Please, Dad." A car passed behind me, headlights sliding across the empty lot. I felt my hand tighten on the steering wheel. Alana never asked for much. She wasn't dramatic. She grew up fast after her mother died, learned to hold her pain like grown folks do. Quiet, tucked away, only visible in the way she stared out windows. For her to say this, something had shaken her. "Where are you?" "In my room. She doesn't know I'm calling." She. It didn't take much to know who she meant. Vanessa had been short with me that morning, moving around the kitchen with clipped sentences and heavy steps. I didn't think much of it. I'd gotten used to reading weather patterns in her behaviour. But now, standing alone in that parking lot, her mood from earlier pressed against the back of my neck like a cold hand. "Tell me if you're safe," I said. "I am. Just don't walk into the house tonight." She sniffed, trying to swallow her fear. Alana rarely cried, not since her mother's funeral. Hearing that little break in her voice felt like someone tightening a rope around my chest. "I'll figure something out," I told her. "Keep your door locked." "Dad, I mean it. You can't come home." When the call ended, I didn't move right away. The lot was empty except for my truck. A few windows from the gym still glowed, but everything else around me was still. I could hear the distant hum of traffic, a dog barking somewhere in the neighborhood behind the school. Ordinary sounds. Nothing dramatic, but inside me something shifted. I leaned against the truck and tried to breathe around it. Years of keeping quiet, of smoothing over arguments, of telling myself Vanessa just needed time, of convincing Alana things would settle, pressed together at once. I'd spent so long holding the house together that I didn't notice how much of myself I kept setting aside, piece by piece, until there wasn't much left to stand on. I turned the key in the ignition, but didn't pull out of the lot. Instead, I sat there and listened to the engine idle. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady at first, then slowly tightening until my knuckles whitened. All those little boundary crossings I shrugged off. Vanessa taking my card, shifting bills around, talking down to Alana, making decisions about the house like it was hers alone, rose up like they'd been waiting. Every moment I told myself to keep quiet replayed in a long, slow line. For the first time, silence didn't feel like protection. It felt like erasure. Like I'd let myself become a background figure in my own home. The streetlights flickered on across the campus. Students would have been heading home from practice right about now if it were any other night. I would have been driving the same route, pulling into the same driveway, unlocking the same door, never suspecting anything. But Alana's voice stayed with me, the tremble hidden beneath her words, the warning she didn't know how to shape except through fear. I eased the truck out of the lot and rolled toward the street, not sure yet where I was headed. I just knew I wasn't going home. Not tonight. I slowed the truck as I reached our block, easing it toward the curb a little farther down than usual. The houses along the street blended into each other at this hour, families settling into their routines, television murmuring behind curtains, kids running the last lap before bedtime. I parked beneath a maple tree that had shed half its leaves, letting the engine quiet down before turning the key all the way. Everything felt suspended, like the world waited for me to make a decision I wasn't ready for. I leaned forward, elbows resting on the steering wheel, and looked toward my house. From a distance, it still resembled the safe place I'd built years ago. Fresh paint, trimmed hedges, the porch light I'd installed with Alana one summer afternoon. But the longer I stared, the more unsettled I became. Nothing looked wrong, yet something felt off. Maybe it had nothing to do with the house, and everything to do with the sound of my daughter's voice earlier. Going home would mean pretending again. Pretending that Vanessa's clipped tone didn't bother me. Pretending the little digs she took at Alana weren't digs at me too. Pretending the tension in that house wasn't wearing grooves into my patience. But ignoring Alana's warning didn't sit right either. I shifted in my seat, trying to think clearly while my nerves tugged me in opposite directions. A car door shut behind me. I straightened up. One of my neighbours, Mr. Carter, walked toward his own driveway, waving when he recognized me. "Evening, Liam. You're working late again?" Something like that. He came closer, stopping near my window. "You feeling all right? Haven't seen you around as much." I shrugged. "Busy week." Mr. Carter glanced toward my house, then lowered his voice a bit, as if sharing gossip he didn't want spreading too far. "Saw a fellow over there the other day. Tall guy, leather jacket. Looked like he belonged somewhere else. Came by around noon. He must have been at work." My jaw tightened before I had the chance to hide the reaction. "You sure he was going to my place?" "Positive. Went right to your porch. Knocked twice, then walked around back." "Maybe a contractor?" "He didn't look like one though." He gave me a polite nod and headed into his house. I sat there, fingers tapping the steering wheel. A stranger coming to my home wasn't unusual in itself. People dropped off flyers, wrong addresses happened. But walking around back without being invited? That lodged in my chest like a splinter. I watched the windows of my house, half expecting movement. Nothing stirred. The stillness didn't reassure me, it just stretched out the distance between what I knew and what I feared. My phone buzzed. Matteo. I answered, grateful for the distraction. "You forget something?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "Your toolbox is still sitting open in the boiler room. Thought maybe you rushed out for an emergency." "You good?" I rubbed my forehead. "I'm fine, just needed to step away." "You never leave your tools out. You could set your watch by the way you pack up." He wasn't wrong. There were rhythms I kept without thinking. "Long day," I said. Didn't check everything. He paused long enough for me to picture him leaning against the security desk, arms folded. "Look, man, you sound off. You want me to swing by?" "No, I'm all right." "You sure?" I hesitated. Matteo wasn't the type to pry, but he noticed things, probably more than I ever admitted. "Just family stuff," I told him. "Don't worry about it." "Hey, I'm not judging, just checking in. If you need something, call me. Don't sit in it alone." "I hear you." "All right, get home safe, or get where you need to be safe." His words landed heavy. He didn't know about the call from Alana, but somehow he'd brushed against the truth anyway. I hung up and let the silence return. Cars drifted past now and then. Porch lights flickered on. Someone laughed across the street. Everything around me kept moving like any other night, while I sat still, trying to figure out how my life slid into a space where I had to choose between my own house and my daughter's frightened plea. A memory surfaced, one of the early evenings after I remarried. Vanessa had rearranged the kitchen, claiming the old setup was chaotic. She moved the spices, the utensils, even the coffee maker. Alana tried to help, but Vanessa corrected her every movement, telling her she didn't know what she was doing. I stepped in, suggested we could keep some things the way they were. Vanessa sighed like I'd just criticized her character. "I'm trying to make this place functional," she said. "We can adjust together," I replied. "I'm the one who uses it the most, Liam. Let me handle it." Alana stood off to the side, arms crossed, pretending she didn't care. Later that night she told me, "You let her walk all over you." But I said nothing, believing compromise was the price of rebuilding a family. Now, parked under a streetlight with the weight of Alana's warnings settling deeper, I wondered if that compromise had been nothing more than surrender, disguised as patience. I stepped out of the truck to get some air. Leaves crackled beneath my boots. From where I stood, the house looked calm, almost welcoming. But that calm felt like a cover I could peel back if I walked a little closer. I didn't. Something in me resisted the pull. Not out of fear exactly, but out of instinct. An instinct sharpened by years in the service. Years of reading people. Learning when a space no longer belonged to me the way it once had. My phone buzzed again. A text from Alana. Don't let her see you. Please, Dad. I typed, then deleted, then typed again. I'm close by. I won't go in. Stay in your room. Another message arrived an instant later. She's been talking on the phone for the last hour, whispering, keeps checking the back door. I sat back in the truck, watching the house with a different kind of focus. Not fear, something sharper. A quiet certainty that whatever happened earlier wasn't small, and whatever she was whispering about now wasn't harmless. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A porch light flicked on without warning. Someone laughed next door. All those tiny sounds layered over one another until my thoughts drifted back to what Mr. Carter mentioned. Someone wandering around the back of my house in broad daylight. I checked the time. Nearly 9. Normally I'd be inside by now, washing up, asking Alana about her day, even if she didn't feel like talking. Pretending not to notice Vanessa's irritation when the conversation lasted too long. But nothing about tonight felt normal. Another car slowed as it passed my truck, headlights sweeping over the street. I recognized the couple inside, neighbors from the next block over. The woman waved. The man gave me a friendly nod. Everything all right, Liam? He called. Yeah, just taking a minute. Vanessa mentioned you've been working late a lot. We figured you had one of those busy weeks. I managed a polite smile, though something twisted inside me at the thought of her talking about me with people she barely knew. He didn't notice the change in my expression. Hope things settle for you, man. See you tomorrow. They drove on. I stared at my own front door again, thinking about how many people seem to know pieces of my life except the people who should have known what mattered most. Vanessa always talked easily with strangers. She crafted stories that painted her in soft light and me in patient, steady tones. Nothing offensive, nothing anyone would question. Just enough to shape a picture. I leaned back, pressing my shoulders against the seat. The longer I sat there, the clearer one thing became. Whatever line existed between my home and something else had been quietly shifting inch by inch, while I convinced myself everything was fine. A shadow moved behind one of the living room curtains. Not a shape I could decipher, just a ripple, faint but unmistakable. I watched it for a few breaths, waiting to see if it returned. It didn't. Still, it was enough to tell me I shouldn't step through that door tonight. I stayed where I was, one hand resting on the ignition key, the other on my phone, waiting for whatever came next. Alana's message arrived while I was still parked beneath the maple tree. The vibration startled me, though I'd been waiting for it without admitting that to myself. I opened the text and read slowly, making sure I understood every word. Dad. I heard her talking again. She wasn't alone this time. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Another text followed almost immediately. It was the same man from earlier this week. They were in the kitchen. She didn't know I was in the hallway. My pulse thudded once, heavy enough to leave a faint ache behind. I leaned back against the seat, swallowing the unease rising in my throat. "What did you hear?" I typed. Her reply came fast, like she'd been holding everything in all evening. They were talking about the future. She said something like, "You're stubborn, but you won't be able to block her anymore. He said the house would be hers anyway once you sign." Then she laughed, like it was already done. My thumb hovered over the screen. "Block her from what?" "She said you're dragging your feet on paperwork. She called you predictable. And he said, he won't stop us once this is settled." I stared toward the house again. It didn't look any different, but something inside it clearly had shifted. The last few months flashed through my mind. The missing card, the conversations she cut short whenever I walked in, the way she'd been moving through the house like everything belonged to her alone. I texted back, "Stay in your room. Don't argue with her. I'll handle it." Alana sent only one more message. "Dad, don't trust her." I slid the phone into my pocket and rubbed the bridge of my nose. The muscles in my jaw tightened, then eased, then tightened again. I forced myself to breathe normally. A cold wind started up, rustling the branches overhead. I pulled my jacket closer and tried to steady my thoughts. I needed to know whether this was a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by fear, or something real, something deliberate. I started the truck again, not to drive home, but to circle the block once. My mind needed that movement, something to push against the rising tension. When I returned to the same spot, I glanced toward the house a final time and made a decision. I wasn't going inside tonight, but I wasn't letting ignorance eat at me either. There was one thing I had to check. I drove toward the community centre parking lot a few streets away and stopped under a dim street lamp. From there, I pulled out the folded envelope I kept in my glove compartment. Copies of old insurance papers and the deed to the house. I liked having backups when no one else thought to look. The deed was still in my name. Nothing on the document had changed. It should have eased my mind. But instead, it reminded me that the original papers were kept in the safe in our bedroom closet. And suddenly, I wasn't sure whether the safe still held what I thought it did. I tapped the steering wheel once, twice, then grabbed my phone and logged into our joint account. The app rejected my password. I tried again, and again. Another rejection flashed. A slow burn began in my chest. Vanessa handled some of the bills. She claimed it balanced things out since I worked full-time and she managed the house. But she'd never changed our account settings without telling me, never locked me out entirely. I clicked forgot password out of habit, but the recovery email wasn't mine anymore. That was enough to send a new kind of alert through me. I sat still until the tension thinned just enough for me to move my hands again. After a moment, I typed a single message to Alana. "I need to check something. Stay where you are." Then I drove back toward the house, stopping at the same spot under the maple tree. From there, I could watch the windows without drawing attention. Nothing inside seemed unusual. No arguing, no voices, just the usual glow from the living room. The normalcy made everything feel stranger. I picked up a small notebook from the center console, one I usually used for maintenance logs, and wrote down what I'd seen so far. Account access changed. Safe? Unknown. Stranger reported by neighbor. Alana overheard conversation. It felt clinical, like I was troubleshooting a broken system. But lists helped me think. Lists didn't panic. Lists didn't jump to conclusions. They waited for facts. My phone buzzed again. Not Alana this time. The bank notification. A charge from a hardware store on the other side of town. I hadn't bought anything there in months. I checked the timestamp. 2 hours ago. A moment later, another charge appeared. Household supplies. Then a gas station. Small amounts, but frequent. I jotted those down too. My world, once predictable and slow-moving, had started to tilt without warning. I needed to regain my balance before everything slid out from under me. I opened a folder on my phone labeled Receipts. It held snapshots of old bills, maintenance invoices, and the renewal file for the home insurance. I scanned through them, making sure the coverage details were still the same. Nothing jumped out. Yet the simple act of reviewing them with suspicion made me feel like a stranger in my own life. A shadow passed in front of the living room curtain again. This time, I didn't flinch. I simply noted the movement and waited for whatever came next. My phone chimed. It was Alana. She went into your closet. I heard the safe open. She changed the code again. I pressed my thumb hard into the steering wheel. Is she still upstairs? I typed. Yes, she's pacing. I considered my options. Confrontation would only tip my hand, and I wasn't about to drag my daughter into anything dangerous. I needed information, quietly, methodically, without letting my emotions decide my next steps. I pulled out the notebook again and wrote a new line. Safe, compromised. Little by little, the house that once felt like a refuge had become something I could no longer read. I'd built those walls with the intention of sheltering my family. Now those same walls held conversations I wasn't meant to hear, and decisions I wasn't meant to influence. I shut the notebook and placed it beside me. A car rolled down the street, its tires crunching over loose gravel. I watched it pass, then looked back toward the porch of my house. The light over the doorway blinked once before steadying again. The night air carried a faint chill, but it didn't push me away. If anything, it sharpened my thoughts. I waited a little longer, just watching. My mind gathered details the way it always had, quietly, carefully, while my body stayed still enough to blend into the background of the street. A little after 9, a car I didn't recognize slowed near my driveway. It rolled forward, paused just long enough for me to notice, then eased into the space behind my truck. The passenger door opened first. A man stepped out, tall, lean, wearing a jacket I'd seen only once, when Mr. Carter mentioned him. He scanned the street, then walked with the kind of confidence you don't show on a block where you don't belong. I stayed still in my seat, lowering myself until my head rested below the window line. The driver's door opened next. Vanessa climbed out. No hurry, no hesitation. She walked like she owned the night. She didn't knock. She didn't look around to check if anyone watched. She pulled out a key I hadn't seen before, one with a red band around the top, and fit it into the lock. The door opened for them. He stepped in first. She followed. The porch light spilled a faint sheen across the walkway, enough for me to catch the movement, but not enough to read expressions. What mattered was the ease between them. They moved in sync, like two people who'd rehearsed this entrance before. I slid out of the truck as quietly as I could and stood behind the maple tree. Being closer didn't ease my nerves, it sharpened them. The front door hung open for a moment. Voices drifted out, not loud, but clear enough when the breeze carried them my way. I took a few slow steps forward, stopping just before the boundary where the light might catch me. "He won't check," the man said. "He never checks," Vanessa replied. The door clicked shut. I stood there, hands resting at my sides, breathing through the heaviness settling in my chest. There were parts of my life I already suspected had been chipped at, but this felt like a crack running straight through the foundation. I moved toward the side of the house, staying close to the hedge line. The kitchen window sat just high enough for me to hear without being seen. Their voices drifted through the open gap at the top of the pane. "The stair rail will need to come loose gradually," he said. "If it gives way all at once, it'll look intentional." "And the light fixture?" she asked. "I'll loosen the bracket, just a turn or two." "Good," she murmured. He walked across the kitchen, footsteps on tile. Vanessa's voice lowered, but I caught enough. "He's stubborn, but he won't block me much longer. Once the paperwork is sorted, the house will be secure. And if he resists..." "He won't," she said. "He takes the path of least resistance every time." The words sat in my ears like stones. I backed away from the window, steadying myself on the siding. My own house, my own wife, speaking about me as though I were some old piece of furniture that would eventually collapse if nudged in the right direction. They moved deeper into the house. I followed the sound as far as the garage door. A faint scraping noise came from inside, metal against concrete. Before I could register whether they'd noticed anything missing, the inner door opened. Vanessa stepped into the garage, still talking to the man. "He keeps too much junk in here. It's better if I hold the keys. He won't bother looking." She locked the garage from the inside, turning the latch with a kind of satisfaction I'd never seen on her face when she spoke to me. I eased back into the shadow until her silhouette passed the small frosted window, then waited. Her footsteps faded. The man asked something I couldn't hear. Their voices blended into a murmur, and that murmur cut into me more than any clear sentence could have. I retreated toward the sidewalk. Halfway there, I caught sight of a window on the second floor. Alana's shadow crossed it. She paused, pressed her hand to the curtain, then withdrew. She'd seen Vanessa return. She'd seen the man. Or maybe she'd heard them again, and the sight only confirmed what she'd been afraid to tell me outright. I stepped back under the maple tree and leaned against the trunk. The bark scraped my jacket, grinding me just enough to keep my thoughts from spiraling. Memories from the past few years nudged forward, moments I'd dismissed as misunderstandings or stress. Vanessa moving my tools without asking, shutting down conversations with Alana before they started, reorganizing bills without handing me the new statements, calling me forgetful when I asked simple questions. Pieces of a puzzle I didn't know I owned. A car drove past, the noise pulling me out of my thoughts. I watched the taillights fade before looking back toward the house. The garage door remained shut. The porch light stayed on. My phone buzzed. Alana again. She locked the garage from inside. She told me you don't need to touch anything in there anymore. Dad. I don't like how she said it. I typed back with careful fingers. "I'm outside. I saw her come home. Stay calm. She replied instantly. He's still here. I heard his voice in the hallway. A flush of anger crept up before I pressed it down. Anger wouldn't help either of us. Clarity would. I'm not coming in. Keep your door closed. I won't be far. I slipped the phone into my pocket and began walking toward the end of the block, needing a few steps to steady myself. The ground felt uneven beneath my boots, though the sidewalk was smooth. I slowed as I reached the corner, looked back at the house one more time. Vanessa stepped onto the porch. She carried a small lockbox in one hand, the one I kept important papers in. She tested its latch, shook it once, then smirked. She didn't notice me watching from the corner. She walked back inside, shutting the door with a firmness that didn't feel casual. I stayed out there for a while, listening to the soft hum of passing cars and distant voices from houses that still held warmth. The night didn't feel cold, but something inside me did. Not a sharp cold, more like the slow chill that settles in a place where heat used to live. The dog barked from 2 houses over. A porch light flickered off. I rested my palms on my thighs, weighing the next step, knowing the line had shifted in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. Then I straightened up and looked toward the driveway, letting my thoughts settle long enough for the next move to take shape. I walked the block twice before stopping near the Carter house. The porch light was still on, and Mr. Carter sat in his usual evening spot, sorting through his mail with the patience of a man who'd lived long enough to make peace with slow things. He waved me over. "You're out late, Liam?" "Just getting some air." He set the envelopes aside and leaned forward a little, lowering his voice the way older folks do when they're not sure if what they're about to say counts as gossip or concern. "Meant to mention something earlier. Your wife stalked me the other day. Asked a strange question." I braced myself. What kind of question? She wanted to know the process for medical power of attorney. Said she needed it in case something happened. Thought maybe you were dealing with health issues you hadn't shared. My throat tightened, but I kept my expression mild. Did she say why she needed it? No, just kept asking how it worked, and if there's a way to make decisions even if the other person hasn't agreed yet. I told her that's not how it goes, but she didn't seem satisfied. He chuckled softly, unaware of the way his words were carving through me. Figured it was one of those couples things. Folks get worried at our age. I thanked him and stepped away before he noticed the shift in my breathing. Every step back toward my truck brought old memories with it. Memories I hadn't expected to revisit. Years ago, when my first wife was sick, she made me sit beside her at the dining table. She couldn't hold a pen steady anymore, but her voice carried strength. "Don't sign anything out of guilt," she told me, or fear, or sadness. People take advantage of hearts that hurt. I remembered brushing it off, telling her she didn't need to worry about me. But she'd held my hand with surprising force. Protect what matters. Protect yourself too. Those words echoed now, as if she'd whispered them a moment ago. I reached the truck and sat inside, resting both hands on my knees. Everything Vanessa had been doing, changing passwords, rearranging paperwork, bringing a stranger into my house, looked different through the lens of Mr. Carter's story. The puzzle pieces that felt scattered a day ago began forming the faint outline of a picture I didn't want to see. My phone buzzed again. "Matteo, you heading home?" he asked. "Not yet." "Thought so. You don't sound settled." I hesitated, then decided to test the ground. "You ever meet a lawyer named Briggs? Private practice near Westwood Village? The one with the glass office front?" "Yeah, I've seen him around." "Why?" "You see Vanessa near there recently?" He paused long enough to confirm my suspicion. "Couple weeks back. She was talking to Briggs outside his office. Didn't look casual." "You sure?" "I don't forget faces, hermano." "And she had a folder with her. Looked like paperwork. I thought you two were updating wills or something." I closed my eyes for a moment. "No, we weren't." "You want me to come meet you?" "Not right now, but thanks." He didn't push. Matteo rarely did. "Whatever it is, don't wait too long to act." Silence can look like consent. I hung up and stared at the neighborhood resting quietly around me. For a long time, I believed silence was the glue that kept a family from cracking apart. If I absorbed enough tension, if I let other people's moods swallow my own, then maybe everything would smooth itself out. It felt noble, mature, even necessary. But silence can be a hiding place, for others, not just for me. I opened the notebook again and added 2 more lines. Medical POA inquiry. Lawyer meeting confirmed. I tapped the pen against the paper, thinking carefully. One path meant continuing as I had been, shrugging things off, staying quiet, hoping Alana would outgrow her distrust of Vanessa. Hoping Vanessa would settle into something like appreciation. The other path meant stepping into conflict I'd spent years avoiding. Protecting myself might mean disturbing whatever fragile peace still existed. A faint movement near my house drew my attention. The living room curtain shifted again, then a shadow crossed the hallway window just for a heartbeat. I couldn't tell if it was Vanessa or the man she'd brought home. The uncertainty itself made something in my gut twist. Another buzz from my phone, this time from my sister Denise. "Heard from Vanessa. She says you're being distant again. Everything okay?" Another message followed before I could reply. She said she's been crying all night. A familiar frustration rose inside me, not from anger at Denise, but from recognition. Vanessa had always been better at telling stories than facing them. She painted herself as the overwhelmed wife, trying to hold a family together while her husband drifted away. People responded to that. They offered support before asking questions. I typed slowly. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me." Denise replied instantly. She said you hurt her feelings. Maybe you two just need a long talk. I exhaled, not sure whether to laugh or grind my teeth. Vanessa's talent for twisting a situation into sympathy had reached someone who'd known me my whole life. And if Denise believed her, others probably did too. For a moment I sat there, weighing everything. Years of loyalty. Years of swallowing my discomfort. Years of letting things pass because I thought love required endurance. But endurance had begun to feel like disappearance. I placed a phone on the seat beside me and leaned back, letting the tension settle enough for clearer thought. Vanessa was building a story, one where she was the injured party and I was drifting away. Meanwhile, she locked my garage, changed my passwords, and whispered with a man in my kitchen about future plans. Alana wasn't imagining things. Mr. Carter wasn't confused. Matteo wasn't mistaken. And I wasn't exaggerating any of it. A faint tapping sound came from somewhere down the street, a loose gate maybe. I listened without really hearing, my mind circling one conclusion I'd been avoiding. Choosing peace had cost me more than I realized. Another message from Alana lit up the screen. Dad, she's packing a bag. I can hear them talking. They're talking about Monday, something about signatures. That pushed everything into place. Signatures, paperwork, urgency. I sat up straighter, pulse thudding once in my chest. I typed back, "Stay in your room. I'll figure out what to do next." Then I closed the notebook, placed it carefully in the center console, and reached for the truck keys, letting the weight of everything settle before turning them in my hand. I didn't start the truck right away. Sitting there with my hands around the steering wheel, I let my thoughts line up in a way they hadn't done in years. Anger wanted the first seat, but I pushed it aside. A man in my position couldn't afford to act on anger. Not now. Maybe not ever. I needed clarity, not heat. I turned the ignition only to get moving, not to go home. The house had become a battlefield I couldn't enter yet. Instead, I drove slowly toward the community centre, the same place where I'd reviewed the deed earlier. The lot was half empty, leaving me space to think. My first task made itself clear: protect whatever records I still had. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the envelope with backup documents, insurance forms, tax statements, home maintenance receipts. The stack was thin compared to what should have existed. Vanessa had convinced me to streamline last year, claiming clutter stressed her out. I'd tossed duplicates then, not realizing I was tossing my own safety net. I spread what remained across the passenger seat, scanning for anything that connected back to the property. A few pages still held value: an older copy of the homeowner's insurance policy, last year's mortgage statement, an appraisal from before we married. I snapped photos of everything and uploaded them to a private folder. Then I copied the files to a small USB drive I kept for odd jobs at school. A few breaths steadied me. Organizing things always did. My next step required more precision. I logged into my personal bank account, the one Vanessa didn't know about because I opened it years ago to deposit my Marine retirement money. It still worked. Relief passed through me as I changed the password, enabled two-step verification, and updated recovery information. I checked recent activity. Nothing out of place. She hadn't reached this far yet. But the joint account still bothered me. Being locked out without warning was more than disrespect. It was strategy. Someone trying to erase my ability to track money didn't want me seeing where it was going. I dug through the center console until I found an old USB tucked beneath a pair of worn gloves. That drive had been used for school projects, safety inspection photos, maintenance logs. No one would think twice if they saw it. I plugged it into my phone using an adapter and started transferring every document I'd collected so far. Screenshots of unauthorized purchases, a list of password changes I never approved, timestamps from the bank notifications, even the notes I'd scribbled in the maintenance notebook. Small pieces, but they formed a pattern. Patterns told stories. Stories could expose intent. A sharp vibration buzzed against my leg. A new text. Unknown number. You out working late again? I blinked at the screen. The tone felt too familiar to be random spam. Another message followed before I could respond. Funny how you're not home when you usually are. I read it twice. The words weren't openly hostile, but they carried an undercurrent, like someone nudging me to reveal where I was.
I didn't answer. The phone buzzed again. Tell her if you're going to be late. I locked the screen and placed the phone face down. Keeping calm took effort.
The messages didn't sound threatening, but they came with a timing that made my back tense. If Vanessa had someone watching my routine, then she was building a bigger plan than I wanted to imagine. I stepped out of the truck to clear my head, stretching my legs. A couple of teenagers rode their bikes through the Watt, weaving in and out of the painted lines. One of them nodded at me before pedaling off. Ordinary life, still moving. Mine felt paused, suspended between knowledge and proof. When I returned to the truck, I double-checked the USB and tucked it inside my jacket. Then I stared at my phone again before finally powering it off. I couldn't keep getting pulled into conversations I didn't choose. Once the quiet settled, I drove to the school. The building sat dark except for a few lights left on by the custodial crew. I parked near the back entrance, grabbed my toolbox, and walked around to the maintenance shed. My key still worked. Good. Inside, the smell of oil and old metal grounded me. I slid the USB behind a row of boxed light bulbs, far in the back, where no one ever looked unless they needed to replace the gym fixtures. It wasn't perfect, but it was safer there than anywhere in my house. Before leaving, I checked the workbench drawers for a spare padlock and clipped it onto the shed door. No one questioned extra security around equipment. My phone stayed off until I returned to the truck. When I powered it on, new notifications streamed in. 3 voicemails from Vanessa, 2 missed calls, and a string of texts. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? You're being cruel. I'm worried about you." I didn't buy any of it. Not after hearing her talk about me like I was an obstacle she planned to remove. Not after watching her bring a stranger into my home. I tapped the messages but didn't reply. Responding too soon could tip her off that I knew more than she thought. Silence, once my weakness, had become a shield. Another text came in, but this one from Alana. She's acting different, pacing, checking the back door every few minutes. "Dad, please don't come inside." I leaned back in the seat, letting the weight of her words settle. When your own child asks you not to enter the house you pay for, something foundational has shifted, something deeper than conflict. I wrote back, "I'm not coming in. Keep your door locked. I'm close." Her response came instantly. "She keeps saying you're avoiding her." She sounded angry. Then she sounded sad, like she wanted me to feel guilty too. Vanessa's patterns repeated themselves. She cycled through emotions the way other people changed jackets, whichever one served the moment. I drove slowly toward the school field, parking beside the chain-link fence. The quiet there was different from the quiet in my truck earlier. It had more space to think. I pulled out the notebook again, flipping through the pages filled over the last 24 hours. The list had grown long enough to make my stomach twist. Account lockout, medical POA, lawyer meeting, unknown man, safe code changed, garage locked, unusual charges, texts from unknown number. Each line looked small on its own. Together, they formed a roadmap, one leading to a place I didn't want to go, but couldn't pretend didn't exist. A gust lifted loose scraps of paper along the field. I watched them scatter before forcing myself to focus. Something was coming. I could feel it in the way conversations shifted, the way Vanessa's voice tightened around certain words, the way Alana had begun triple-checking her bedroom lock, like she was bracing for impact. Some men don't fear storms. They fear the stillness before them. The moment when the air goes too quiet, when animals pause, when even the wind seems to hold its breath. That's where I found myself, standing in the middle of that stillness, waiting for whatever would break first. I closed the notebook and slipped it inside the glove compartment, then rested my hands on the steering wheel. The night carried on around me, cars passing in the distance, the rustle of grass against the fence, the hum of a generator behind the building, ordinary sounds. And under all of it, a pressure building slowly, pushing me toward decisions I'd avoided for too long. I didn't start the engine yet. I just stayed there, thinking through the next steps, letting the weight of everything settle into a plan I hadn't fully shaped, but knew I'd need soon. I drove home earlier than usual the next evening, keeping the truck's engine low as I turned onto my street. Nothing about the night felt settled. A restlessness simmered under my skin, the kind that tells a man he needs to see something with his own eyes before deciding his next step. I parked a few houses down, waited long enough to watch you came and went, then walked toward my place with steady breaths. The porch looked the same as always, but the air around it carried a tension that nudged me forward and held me back at the same time. I checked the driveway. No unfamiliar cars. The house lights glowed behind the curtains. Vanessa's silhouette passed slowly, pausing near the living room, then drifting toward the kitchen. She didn't see me. I tried the front door, locked. I still had my key, so I turned it quietly and stepped inside. The hallway smelled faintly of cleaning spray, too strong for the time of night. Something metallic rode beneath it, the kind of scent you don't notice unless you spent years working around broken fixtures. I took a few steps toward the staircase. The first plank creaked like it always did. The second shifted a bit. As soon as my foot landed on the third, the wood sagged sharply, not the usual groan of an old house. This felt deliberate. A fracture snapped under my weight, and the board dipped hard enough to throw me off balance. My knee jarred painfully. My hand shot out, clamping around the railing. The rail wobbled, looser than it should have been. That loose. The exact way Vanessa and that man had discussed. A rush of heat spread across my chest. Not anger. Something colder. Awareness. I pulled myself upright, testing the stair with my weight. It bowed again, just slightly, but enough to confirm it wasn't wear and tear. A man knows when a house shifts naturally. This wasn't natural. "Liam?" Her voice floated from the kitchen. She appeared in the hallway seconds later, eyes widening in an overly dramatic arc the moment she saw me holding the railing. "Oh my God! What happened? Did you fall?" Before I could answer, Mrs. Tillman, our next-door neighbour, stepped onto the porch, calling through the still-open door. "Everything all right in here? I heard a thud." Vanessa walked past me with a hand over her mouth, moving so quickly toward the front that her concern seemed rehearsed. "He scared me half to death," she said, pressing her palm to her chest. "He wasn't supposed to be home yet." Mrs. Tillman looked at me with a mix of worry and confusion. "Are you okay, sweetheart? That sounded rough." I nodded, curling my fingers around the railing in a quiet attempt to check its stability. "I'm fine, just slipped for a second." Vanessa turned around sharply. "If you came home when you said you would, this wouldn't have happened."
A short silence followed. Mrs. Tillman's eyebrows lifted slightly as she glanced between us. Vanessa continued without waiting for a response. I told him the stairs needed fixing. He thinks everything can wait until the weekend. The neighbour murmured something sympathetic before stepping back onto the porch.
As soon as she turned away, the concern drained from Vanessa's expression. "Why are you sneaking around?" she asked flatly. "You said you'd be working late." I stepped down off the broken stair carefully. I didn't sneak. I walked in my own house. "You startled me, and you made a scene in front of the neighbour." Her tone held annoyance, not worry. Annoyance, as if my potential fall were an inconvenience. "The stair gave out," I said. "That board wasn't loose yesterday." She shrugged lightly. "How's his age, Liam? You of all people should know that." Something inside me shifted, not loud, but decisive. The distance between the truth and the story she wanted others to believe stretched wide enough for someone to fall through. She moved past me toward the garage door and tugged at the handle, checking the lock. "I already told you," she said. "This area is off limits until things get reorganized. You always misplace things and then blame me." I watched her pull the lock twice, almost proudly. The gesture wasn't about safety, it was about ownership. The garage held my documents, my tools, my life, and she had locked it without hesitation. "Where's Alana?" I asked. Her shoulders stiffened for a moment. "In her room, doing homework. Don't wake her with all that stomping around." I caught the edge in her voice. She wasn't nervous. She was irritated that I'd disrupted the script she'd prepared. "You told the neighbours I hurt your feelings," I said. She froze, hand still on the doorknob. "They worry about me. I needed someone to talk to." "You told them I'd been distant and cold. Isn't it true?" I didn't answer immediately. Choosing silence used to come naturally. Tonight, it landed differently. She folded her arms. "If you're going to start another argument, don't bother. I'm tired." Her dismissal cut sharper than anything she'd said before. I stepped past her, moving into the living room. The house, my house, felt different. Not physically, emotionally, like a space that no longer recognized me. Vanessa lingered in the hallway, watching me with the cautious expression of someone guarding territory. "Why did you come home early?" she asked. "Wanted to check on things." "There's nothing to check." The stair behind me groaned softly, as if to contradict her. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, opened a drawer, and pretended to search for something. Her eyes followed me. The tension between us thickened, not loud, not explosive, quiet, severe. "You're acting strange," she said. "Am I?" "Yes, it's unsettling." I closed the drawer gently and looked at her. She held my gaze for just a moment before glancing away, as if she feared too much eye contact would expose something. "I'm going to bed," she said abruptly. "We'll talk in the morning." She walked away before I could reply. Her bedroom door shut with a soft thud. I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of pipes settling. For a brief second, I felt the years press against me. The years of keeping calm, of giving room, of carrying weight no one acknowledged. The third stair had almost given way under me. That crack in the wood told a truer story than anything she'd said tonight. I checked the hallway. Everything was still. I moved to the front window and looked out over the quiet street. A lone car drifted by, its engine low, barely registering in my thoughts. I stayed there for a while, resting one hand on the windowsill, feeling the grain of the wood beneath my fingers. The simple contact steadied me enough to consider my next step. Not with panic, not with rage, but with the steady calm of someone who finally understood the cost of doing nothing. The house remained still behind me, holding its secrets. I listened to that stillness and thought carefully, letting each thought settle before the next one formed. Alana slipped the flash drive into my hand the next morning before school, the way someone might pass contraband. She didn't say a word, just looked at me once, eyes tight, then hurried toward the bus stop. I didn't call after her. No questions, no reassurance. That look told me everything she wasn't ready to speak out loud. I walked back to the truck and sat for a moment, watching the bus pull away. A part of me wished she hadn't felt the need to help in ways a child shouldn't. Another part knew we were far past wishing for gentler circumstances. Once she was safely gone, I plugged the drive into my phone using the adapter I kept for work. A single audio file sat on it, labelled only kitchen. I tapped it, bracing myself. Vanessa's voice came through first, steady, low, almost bored. He's slipping. He doesn't pay attention the way he used to. The man answered. Then you're close. Everything's lined up. There was the scrape of a chair, movement, a glass being set down. Vanessa again. Monday should be fine. He'll sign if he thinks it's about insurance. He never reads the details. The man laughed under his breath. And if he asks questions? He won't. He hates conflict more than he hates mistakes. I paused the recording, letting the words fold around me. It wasn't the most incriminating audio, no threats, no explicit plans, but the tone told a deeper truth. These two had been talking like this for a long time. Comfortable, confident, certain I'd stay asleep at the wheel. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was how casually they said it. I closed the file and leaned back, the seat pressing into my shoulders. A slow understanding settled in, the kind that doesn't shock or burn, but pulls quietly at your insides, the way a tide pulls at a shoreline. I needed more, something concrete, something legal, something undeniable. So I returned to the house when I knew Vanessa would be out. She told me she had errands. Saturday errands usually meant wandering through shops, chatting with strangers like she'd known them all her life. I waited until her car reached the end of the street before heading inside through the side door. The house felt still, not peaceful, just waiting. I checked the safe first. It sat in the closet behind the stacked shoe boxes. Locked. She changed the code again. I didn't bother trying to guess. Instead, I crouched down and examined the drawer beneath it, the one where I kept older files before transferring them to the lockbox. One folder remained, a stray one she must have overlooked. Inside were only 3 documents: a car registration, an old insurance renewal notice, and a packet titled Property Transfer Form, Draft. My name appeared and the signature line at the bottom. Except the handwriting wasn't mine. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with certainty. The signature wasn't forged well enough to pass an audit, but it was close enough for someone expecting a tired husband to scribble something quickly. Someone at a bank or lawyer's office might rubber stamp it without looking closely. I held the paper up, studying each curve of the pen stroke. The person who wrote it knew enough about my handwriting to imitate the slant and spacing, but not the pressure or the way I naturally tied certain letters together. Someone had practiced, probably more than once. I placed the form back in the folder and slipped it inside my jacket. Next, I checked the garage. The lock she'd installed wasn't complicated. A simple tension wrench and jiggle key from my maintenance kit opened it in under a minute. Inside, the space was too organized. Containers I'd labeled years ago now held different items. My toolbox had been rearranged. The ladder hung lower. Nails, screws, and brackets shifted to different shelves. Subtle but deliberate. I walked toward the workbench and spotted a sheet of notes folded beneath a hammer. When I opened it, I recognized the handwriting immediately. Vanessa's neat cursive. The paper listed 3 items. Stair rail, loosen twice. Step 3, remove support. Hall fixture, loosen bracket. My jaw tightened. No ambiguity, no innocent explanation. She'd written it like a to-do list, not in code, not in shorthand. Plain English. My house had become a canvas for her planning. I tucked the note with the forged document and scanned the garage for anything else out of place. A few payments from hardware stores lay in the trash, torn receipts showing purchases I never made. Wood shims, electrical screws, gap wedges, adhesive. Tools for adjusting things quietly, not repairing them. All of it fit together now. That wasn't the end of the puzzle. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. I stepped out of the garage before playing it. Vanessa's voice filled my ear, trembling, soft. Liam, I don't know what's happening between us. You're distant. I feel abandoned. Please come home. Let's talk like adults. I never wanted it to be like this. No anger, no accusations, pure performance. She delivered emotion the way a singer holds a note, controlled, intentional, skilled. Another message arrived before I could delete the first, this one from a number I didn't recognize. You're running out of time, big man. No name, no context, just enough pressure to let me know someone was watching. I pocketed the phone and walked out to the driveway. A breeze swept across the yard, stirring the soil in the planter box Alana once helped me build. I stared at it for a moment, remembering the afternoon she'd knelt beside me, with her tiny hands covered in dirt, planting marigolds because they look like little suns. Everything we had built, every quiet moment, was being chipped away. I walked back to the truck, everything I'd gathered so far resting heavy in my jacket. The forged form, the to-do list, the audio file. One more message waited on my phone. Alana. Dad, she was talking on the phone again. Said Monday is the last piece. I'm scared. My fingers tightened around the phone. I typed carefully. I have what we need. Stay where you are. Don't tell her anything. I'm working on the rest. When I set the phone down, my reflection in the screen caught my eye. Tired, older than I felt, and quieter than any man ought to look when fighting for the ground beneath his feet. The evidence told one story. Her confidence told another. The two together revealed her weakness. She believed she'd covered every trace, but she hadn't counted on the one thing that never failed a man who paid attention. People always leave fingerprints in the places they think no one will look. I took a slow breath, letting the pieces settle in my mind, each one sliding into place. The picture wasn't complete yet, but it was forming, and once it fully revealed itself, I knew exactly where I needed to stand. I started the engine, not rushing, letting it hum beneath me when I considered where the next thread might lead. Vanessa was already pacing the living room when I walked through the front door. She froze mid-stride, one hand wrapped around her phone, the other gripping the edge of the couch like she needed support to hold up her expression of wounded innocence. The room used to feel warm. Birthdays, movie nights, quiet mornings. Tonight it felt stripped of all that, as if every memory had been lifted off the walls. "You finally showed up," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut. "Where have you been?" Her shoulders lifted in a way that announced she had been rehearsing her anger. I hung my jacket on the chair and stepped farther into the room, not responding right away. She hated that. Silence disarmed her more than shouting ever could. "I asked you a question, Liam." "I heard you." Her eyes narrowed. "And? Are you going to explain why you're sneaking around like some criminal?" "I came to talk," I said. "Oh, now you want to talk," she laughed bitterly. "After days of ignoring me, after making me look like a fool in front of the neighbours." She took a step closer, lowering her voice to something more venomous. "You think you can just stroll in here and interrogate me? This is my home, my stability, my life." The word "my" landed harder than it should have. I kept my gaze steady. "We built this house together." "You?" she scoffed. "Please, you barely participated in anything except paying bills. That doesn't give you ownership over every decision." Her contempt didn't surprise me anymore. What surprised me was how familiar it felt, like a bad song you've heard too many times to react to. "I know what you've been doing," I said quietly. She stilled, not flinching, calculating. "Doing? What exactly have I been doing? Managing a household while you wander off at all hours? Trying to keep some stability for your daughter while you tear this place apart?" She crossed her arms. "Actually, you know what? I'm done. I'm calling the police. You've been erratic for days and I'm not letting you scare me." The phone rose toward her ear. "Put it down," I said. "Don't tell me what to do." "Vanessa, put it down." She hesitated just enough to reveal she wasn't sure how this would play out. Her thumb hovered over the dial screen. Then she straightened her back, eyes hard, chin lifted. "I will tell them you came in here yelling, that you threatened me. They'll believe me, you know that, right? A woman alone with a man twice her size? They always believe the woman." The words weren't shouted. They were delivered as fact, as if she'd already recited them in her mind 100 times. I didn't raise my voice, I said. "Doesn't matter. Emotional abuse is still abuse, and I'm tired of dealing with your moods. You made this unsafe for me. If you keep pushing, I'll have you removed from this house tonight." She looked almost triumphant, as if she'd found the perfect angle, as if she expected me to crumble under the threat. I reached into my pocket, pulling out the small stack of papers I'd folded earlier. Her confidence flickered. "What's that?" I laid the forged property transfer form on the coffee table, unfolding it slowly so she couldn't pretend she didn't recognize it. "You forgot to hide this one." Her face went pale for a second, then hardened again. "That's nothing. It's a draft. I was planning for emergencies, with my forged signature." She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I added the handwritten to-do note from the garage. "Stair rail, loosen twice. Step 3,
remove support. Hall fixture, loosen bracket.
She stared at the list, blinked once, then pushed it away as if it were contaminated. That's not mine. It's your handwriting. Anyone can copy handwriting. You didn't even try to disguise it. She shifted her weight, arms crossing tighter. You're twisting things. You've always twisted things. That's what abusers do. I let the accusation land without reacting. Her strategy depended on my defensiveness. My silence disrupted her footing. Then I reached for the final piece, the flash drive. There's a recording, I said, of you and him in the kitchen. Her breath caught, a tiny sound, but enough. I don't know what you're talking about. She took a step back, bumping into the arm of the couch. Liam, I'm warning you. Whatever you think you have, it won't hold up. You're spiraling. You need help. I placed the flash drive on the table next to the papers. It's not perfect evidence, but it's enough. Enough to ask questions. Enough to pull bank logs. Enough to get a handwriting analysis. Enough to open an investigation. That word, investigation, made her posture falter again. She dropped her gaze for the first time all evening. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. You're doing this to punish me? No. I reached for my jacket. I'm doing this to protect myself. She surged forward suddenly, grabbing the papers and crumpling them in her fist. You can't leave, not like this. You're trying to paint me as some monster. Everything I did because you never cared enough to manage this family. You left everything to me. You made me take on the burden, and now you call it manipulation. I'm not calling it anything. You're ruining my life. You ruined your own life. The words came out calm, not cruel, just true. She looked stunned, not because she disagreed, but because I said it without raising my voice, without shaking, without begging. You can't walk out of here like some victim, she whispered. You can't. I'm not a victim. I slipped my arms into my jacket. I'm leaving because there's nothing left to say. Liam. Her voice cracked, not with remorse. Fear. Not fear of losing me, but fear of losing control. She grabbed my arm. I gently pulled free. Don't go. We can talk. We talked. Her hand dropped to her side. I opened the front door. Cool air swept into the living room, lifting one of the papers she'd dropped. It fluttered across the carpet. I looked at her one last time, not at the anger or the panic or the performance, but at the hollow truth behind all of it. She'd built a plan with the confidence of someone who believed nothing could expose her. But arrogance always leaves fingerprints. I stepped outside, not slamming the door, not rushing, just walking into the night with my jacket zipped halfway and my keys in my hand. Behind me, I heard her breath hitch, followed by a muffled sound, half curse, half sob. I didn't turn around. The porch light clicked off a few moments later. I kept walking down the driveway, letting the dark wrap around me, while my thoughts found the next necessary step. I spent the night in my truck outside Matteo's apartment building. He'd offered his couch weeks earlier when he first noticed the shift in my voice. But I wasn't ready then. I was ready now. I called him from the parking lot before going in. You need a place? He asked. Just for a bit. Doors open. The couch creaked when I lowered myself onto it, my knees still aching from the broken stair. Matteo didn't hover. He handed me a blanket, nodded once, and went to bed. That kind of quiet respect can steady a man. I slept for a few hours, shallow, but enough to remind me my mind was still working. By morning, my decision had settled into something firm. I called a lawyer I knew through a veterans outreach program. Her name was Mariah Ellison. Sharp, direct, not the type to get lost in other people's theatrics. She told me to bring everything. At her office, I laid out every piece like a mechanic spilling parts onto a shop table. The forged signature, the handwritten list from the garage, photos of the damaged stair, screenshots of changed passwords, bank charges, and the audio file. Mariah listened without interrupting. She didn't flinch at any of it. When I finished, she stacked the papers neatly and leaned back. "There's enough here to raise flags in every department that matters," she said. Fraud, coercion, attempted transfer without consent, tampering with property, maybe more. Enough to open a case. Enough to start 3. She asked for a timeline, so I walked her through the past weeks. My voice stayed calm, as if I were recounting someone else's story. That's how trauma works sometimes. Your tone stays steady, while the truth aches underneath. When we finished, she slid a form toward me. "This authorizes me to file protective measures, including a freeze on assets and a request for an emergency injunction." "Do it," I said. She nodded, then reached for her phone and made 2 calls. One to a clerk she knew, another to the police department's financial crimes office. She didn't raise her voice or use fancy legal phrasing, she just laid out the facts. Facts carried their own weight. By afternoon, 2 officers from the precinct contacted me. I met them in a conference room at the police station. Detective Harris, a tall woman with tired eyes, took the lead. She moved through the evidence slowly, methodically. Every now and then she hummed under her breath, the way people do when organizing information in their heads. "Did she know you were gathering this?" she asked. "No." "Good. Keep it that way." She handed me a brochure about restraining orders and then pointed to the forged document. "This is serious, Mr. Hayes. Altering property transfers isn't something people stumble into. Someone planned this." "I know. We'll move forward. You'll need to give a recorded statement." I did. It took nearly an hour. That evening, Mariah called. "The injunction is filed. She won't be able to touch anything under your name, and she'll be served within 48 hours. I thanked her and sat in the quiet of Matteo's kitchen, the hum of his refrigerator filling the space between us. For the first time in a long while, I felt something that wasn't dread or confusion. It wasn't relief either. It was clarity. 2 days later, officers escorted me back to the house so I could collect necessary items. Vanessa answered the door with a look I'd never seen on her. Not anger, not fear, but disbelief. She hadn't expected consequences to arrive wearing uniforms. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "He's manipulating all of you. He's unstable." Detective Harris remained unmoved. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. There's an active order in place. He doesn't even live here anymore. He abandoned the home." Harris glanced at me, then back at her. "The court determined his rights to the property remain intact until the investigation is completed." Vanessa's mouth opened, then shut again. She stepped back reluctantly. I walked through the living room without looking at her. The space felt emptier than before, as if the walls themselves had let go of any memory worth keeping.
I gathered clothes, personal documents, and a few things of Alana's she'd asked for. Harris waited in the hallway while I packed. Vanessa whispered from behind me. "You're destroying everything, all because you can't handle one misunderstanding." I kept folding my shirts. "You did this, Liam, not me. You're choosing to make this ugly." I zipped the duffel bag. It was already ugly. She didn't follow me out the door, didn't shout, didn't cry.
She simply closed the door behind us, shutting herself inside a house that was no longer protected by her confidence. Once everything was loaded into my truck, Harris shook my hand. "You did the right thing," she said. "People underestimate how dangerous manipulation can be." I didn't answer. Some truths don't need words. The investigation moved quickly after that. Financial records exposed withdrawals she couldn't explain. The lawyer she'd visited confirmed she attempted to file transfer documents using the forged signature. The man from the kitchen, once confronted, admitted to helping with the stairs, but refused to say more. His silence only made him look worse. Within a month, Vanessa lost access to the house, to the accounts, and to any claim she believed she'd secure through pressure. Her attorney, someone she hired last minute, tried arguing emotional distress, but the evidence carried more weight than any performance she staged. Alana chose to stay with me full time. I didn't fight for it. She simply moved toward the parent who hadn't used her life as leverage. There were hearings, paperwork, interviews. It felt less like a battle and more like cleaning up after a storm I didn't cause. Each step pulled me farther from the fear I used to carry silently. But the hardest work wasn't legal. It was internal. One evening, I sat on the bench outside the community centre while Alana attended her tutoring session. The sky dimmed and something inside me settled in a way I hadn't expected. I realised the deepest wound in all of this wasn't the betrayal or the forged papers or the harm to the house. It was the fear of being discarded, of becoming unnecessary, of being replaced. That fear kept me quiet too long, kept me small in my own home, kept me convincing myself that endurance was love. But now, sitting alone with the distant noise of kids playing basketball inside the gym, I could acknowledge that fear without letting it steer me. It didn't define me. It never had. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near Lincoln Park, close to the water, close to open air. I bought a second-hand dining table and let Alana choose the chairs. She picked mismatched ones and laughed when I raised an eyebrow. "It feels like us," she said. "Not perfect, just honest." Vanessa didn't show up to the final hearing. Her lawyer attended alone. The judge noted her absence but proceeded. The case closed with an order restricting her access to anything tied to my name. When we left the courthouse, Alana tucked her arm through mine like she used to when she was little. "Can we get burgers?" she asked. "Yeah, we can." We drove without turning on the radio. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was just quiet, respectful, earned. Later that night, while washing dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. There was no triumph in my expression, no bitterness. Just a man standing where he should have been all along, on his own feet, in his own life, without the weight of someone else's shadow pressing him down. I dried my hands and turned off the faucet, letting the moment settle before moving toward the living room, where Alana was waiting with her homework spread across the coffee table.